Hello and welcome. Over the course of the next two videos, we'll be covering an overview of the arbitral process. In this first video, we'll be starting with how to commence an arbitration, so the notice or the request for arbitration. We will then cover the appointment of an arbitrator, and we'll also look at the first procedural conference. In the next set of videos, we will cover the remainder stages of the arbitration. First, the notice of arbitration. Every arbitration commences with what is called a notice of arbitration. A notice of arbitration sets out the claims of the party and also identifies its intention to initiate arbitration. There may have been a lot of correspondence between the parties about one party making a claim and the other party denying it, but unless a person says that I now wish to commence arbitration, the notice of arbitration is not issued. And that document where a party evinces its intention to commence arbitration is the starting point of any arbitral process. Once a notice of arbitration is issued, depending on the arbitration clause in the agreement, the party may also nominate its own arbitrator. Like we have seen in earlier videos, there may either be one or three arbitrators. If there are three arbitrators, then in the notice of arbitration, the party nominates his or her nominee. If there is a sole arbitrator, the parties usually suggest someone for the consent or confirmation of the other party. Once the notice of arbitration is received, then the defendant or the respondent has one of two options. They can either respond to that, and in that response, they can either simply deny the claims or they can make a counterclaim. And on the other hand, they can simply choose to ignore the notice of arbitration. In the event that a party responds to a notice of arbitration, then, so far as the arbitrator's nomination is concerned, in the context of a sole arbitrator, the respondent either has the option of confirming the person who has been nominated or suggesting an alternative. If it is a three-member tribunal, the respondent makes its own nomination for who can be an arbitrator. Once this exchange is complete, depending on whether there is a counterclaim, the claimant may either choose to stop this round or, if there's a counterclaim, provide another response to the defendant, and that is called a reply to the statement of defense. Once the initial pleadings are complete, you move to the next stage of the arbitration, which is the appointment of the arbitrator. If in the initial stage the parties have been able to reach some agreement on who the arbitrator needs to be, then that is all there is and nothing more needs to be done in this stage. But if, as is very usual, the parties are unable to agree on an arbitrator in a clause that requires their agreement, then they have to go to the default mechanism for appointment. In an ad hoc arbitration, that would require going to the courts seeking their assistance to appoint an arbitrator, or if it's an institutional arbitration, approaching the institution to appoint the arbitrator. Once the arbitrator is appointed, the arbitrators then take charge and then set the process for the remainder of the arbitration. Hereon, the process is quite fluid and there is really no hard and fast rule as to how an arbitration should continue. But by and large, in most arbitration, these are the following steps. First, the arbitrator calls both parties for what is called a first procedural conference. In the first procedural conference, the parties sit together with the arbitrator and try and agree on a procedure for the arbitration. They can identify things such as how complex is the matter. Having had the benefit of the notice of arbitration and the response to the notice, they have some idea of what the claims involved are. So they are in a good position to assess how complex the matter may be. At that time, parties are also asked questions such as whether they have any witnesses that they want to examine, or whether they are okay to rely only on documents. If they want to examine witnesses, how many witnesses may they have? How complicated is the evidence that the witnesses will say, etc., etc. Based on all of these factors, the parties, together with the tribunal, agree on the future steps of the arbitration. They may decide for it to be a documents-only arbitration or may require oral hearings. They can also agree on the number of rounds of exchange of pleadings. Pleadings is simply a word for the statements that the parties wish to make in support of their claims. These processes, once agreed, are then converted into a timetable. In a properly run arbitration, an arbitrator sets the timetable from that date onwards till the award rendering stage. Therefore, there is some certainty for the parties as to what the various milestones are and at what stages what work is anticipated. This enables parties to properly plan for the entirety of the arbitration, including ensuring the availability of the lawyers, if there are, or of their witnesses or the respective parties. Therefore, the first procedural conference is extremely significant, and in a well-run arbitration, the first procedural conference can set the tone for the remainder. In this conference, parties also usually agree on logistical elements such as who will make arrangements for transport, who will make arrangements for accommodation, for venue bookings, what will be the language of the arbitration, etc. This is the first part of the video on the overview of the arbitral process. We will continue this in the second video where the remainder of the arbitral process will be covered. Thank you.